So we're going to talk a little bit about Langchain and Azure SQL. And to join us, we have David Mori. Did I pronounce that right?
That's fine. Thanks a lot for having me, Jay.
I try. Look, it's great having you. It's really wonderful to bring in people. I know you're a principal program manager here, and you've got a lot to talk about. Langchain is such a huge part nowadays of building AI apps.
That's right.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up your screen.
Yeah, perfect.
And then I want to give you the opportunity to share with everybody. So I'm just going to back out. Remember, everybody, if you have questions, we would love to hear from you. Drop them in the chat. We'll do it we'll do it at the end of the session, but I will want to hear from you all as we go. So with that said, go ahead and take it off and do what you got to do.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, I joined 5 or 10 minutes ago, and I heard that, as expected, you all love open source. So the entire presentation here is open source. The website that has been shared right now, azuresql.dev, is a little project I've been working on lately. And if you go on Azure SQL Loves Python, you basically have the presentation. And that's what I will be using today. First, I will kind of give you a little bit of introduction to Azure SQL and why I think it's so cool to use it with Python. And I want you to know that there are a couple of interesting features, also price-wise, that you probably want to know. And then we'll move into Langchain and Chainlit and all the cool stuff that you can build with Azure SQL and Python together. So let's get started. Again, azuresql.dev if you want to follow me on the presentation. And so first of all, I just want to make sure that everyone here knows that there is a free version of Azure SQL. You don't have to spend any money to start using Azure SQL. Everything I'm going to show today is something you can use for free, both in the cloud, if you prefer to just use the latest and greatest version, or even on premises. Because even on premises, there is a free version that we call the SQL Server Developer Edition. It's absolutely free. This is actually something I will be using today right now. It happens right now I'm using a Windows machine, but I also use a lot of Mac and Linux. Actually, I use WSL a lot. And everything works fine there, even if I'm using SQL Server, because, for example, you can use, and I will be doing that in my demos, a SQL Server running in a Linux container in a Ubuntu installation on your Macintosh if you want. Again, today I'm using a Windows machine, but it's really the same. So, wow, who would have said it years ago, right? But now SQL Server can literally run everywhere. Also, keep in mind that I will be saying Azure SQL or SQL Server. It's really the same thing. Azure SQL is just the cloud version of SQL Server. So SQL Server, Azure SQL have exactly the same engine. Actually, Azure SQL usually has the latest and greatest update because we deploy it in the cloud, so it's easier for us to deploy and update the bits there. But it's literally the same. And actually, if you've been following the latest news from Microsoft, you know that now we are working on something called Fabric for all the analytical or data platform requirements that you may have. And Azure SQL works there too in the named Fabric SQL. So SQL Server, the engine, is available everywhere. We like to say from edge to cloud to Fabric is just the same engine. We like to change the name sometimes, so that's why you see Azure SQL, SQL Server, Fabric SQL, but it's all the same. So free on premises, really free, like forever free, and it just runs everywhere. Then what I like to say about Azure SQL and SQL Server, I've been using Python since 90-something, and I love it is better is included. I really love this way of saying of Python, and that's why I also love Azure SQL and SQL Server, because they come better is included. You have support for column story index, you have support for graph models, so you can create edge and nodes there. You have support for geospatial models. You can store JSON, and actually we're just improving JSON support in 2025. You have even XML if you're still using it, but there is much more. You can even have temporal tables, so tables that keep track of changes automatically for you, in-memory lock-free table that are perfect to basically implement super fast key value models. You have different flavor of version control or concurrency control, to be more precise, both based on versioning or locking. So it's a very complete database. It all comes within the same package. There are no extensions that you need to install. It just works out of the box. That's our goal. And one of the issues that I see usually with developers that are interested in starting using a SQL is they are enthusiastic about that. Then they go to the download site or Azure SQL site and they say, man, there are so many choices that you are asking me to make here. What is the right SKU? What is the right version? It's it's too much. So just to simplify, whenever you have to make a choice in the cloud, so on premises, if you are using for developing purposes or test purposes, just go with the Azure SQL Developer Edition. That's the easiest thing you can do. But on premises, go for Azure SQL DB Hyperscale Serverless. Hyperscale is the version of Azure SQL that allows you to scale from a few gigabytes to 100 and more terabytes. It can scale out up to 30 replicas. It has a serverless tier, so it can automatically scale up and down between a certain range of CPU that you set, and you only pay for the second that you use that amount of CPU. So it's very cheap, especially for development, but also can scale a lot when you want to move to production, and you don't have to move your data around. It's just in the same place. But more importantly, this is super important. We decided to really, go pedal to the metal with Hyperscale, and we completely removed the licensing cost of Hyperscale. So the moment you choose a Hyperscale as a SKU, you will not see license anymore as part of your cost. So the cost that you are actually paying is just for running the hardware, just like it happens with an open source database. So keep that in mind, because it really changed the game here. You have an enterprise database with full security, full multi-model, full relational engine. That is also license free. So it's pretty interesting, I would say. Now, hopefully I convinced you to start to take a look at Azure SQL. So the first question would be, okay, I got it. I want to start, and so I like that free is your favorite price. Keep in mind that you can easily move from free tier to Hyperscale without having to move data or everything. We basically manage everything for you. So it's very nice to start small, and then you have the peace of mind that you can ramp up and become, the next Netflix. If that is what you want to do, without having to re-platform your solution, which is, from a developer perspective, a great peace of mind it gives me. Anyway, so the how do you connect to Azure SQL or SQL Server? Well, for now, we use a Python package called PyODBC. And so it means that you need to have a ODBC driver installed. But once that is done, its documentation is very well explained, and everything that you see in this slide deck, you just can click, and I connected the link to the right documentation page. Once you have everything installed in just a matter of minutes, literally, you can basically just do PyDBC connect, get your connection string, and then you can execute a command like this one, select, and here I'm using JSON for just one reason, because I found that it's very convenient for me to just move everything as JSON from and back SQL, because then I can just do JSON load or JSON dump with Python. I don't have to worry too much about iterating over rows or columns. I mean, you can still do it, of course, right? But that's, for my liking, it's much easier, because then I can treat everything as an object. So depending if you're doing analytics, probably you want to have rows and columns and iterate over that. But if you are just building application, it's just easier to have a JSON sent back. And we have a bunch of new features that support JSON creation, as you can see here, that makes super easy to load the result into your Python objects and just deal with it as it would have been a native JSON type generated in Python. This is just plain Python, but of course here we are also focusing on Langchain. But before going that, one of the absolutely important thing I want to underline is that you should not use password if you can to connect to a database, because managing password is a security risk. It's very annoying, I would say. And so we, of course, have full integration with Enter ID. With PyODBC, there's a few steps that you need to do in order to automatically get the token that is associated with your entity account. It's nothing too complex, and it's all, again, very well documented in these two links that I shared, so that you can completely stop using passwords and just enjoy the fact that you log in your machine, or you log in into AZ CLI or Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio or whatever it is your favorite ID, and as long as it's compatible with Azure, we will be able to use that credential to allow you to get in Azure SQL. And also means that when you deploy your solution, you don't have to worry about saving the password somewhere, because everything will be automatically managed for you behind the scene using what we call managed identities. So very important. Again, these two articles here are available for you to get started with. If you need more help, I'm happy to also write an article or specifically blog something around Python. So let me know using Twitter, using this chat, using my email, if you want to learn more about that. So beside that, what is supported with the vast ecosystem in Python with Azure SQL? Well, of course, we cover our bases well, I guess. So Flask, FastAPI, Django, SQL Alchemy are all supported with Azure SQL. But today we are focusing on Langchain. So I'm super happy to announce that just a few weeks ago, we announced full support to Langchain with the Langchain SQL Server Python package that allows you to use SQL Server and Azure SQL is a vector store for Langchain. To help you to get started, and it is also the same repository we'll be using in a few minutes, is the Azure SQL Langchain repository, where I gathered a lot of samples on how to use Langchain with SQL Server and Azure SQL. And basically, I just took the Langchain tutorial, some of the Langchain tutorial, and ported them to use Azure SQL or SQL Server as a vector store, and just work as you would expect. It's very transparent, very, very easy. And that we will be doing it today. So how come we can use the Langchain with SQL Server? Well, because we added, again, very recently support to vectors in Azure SQL and SQL Server. This feature is in public preview right now, which means that it's available in all Azure SQL database you will be creating, and that are also already being created because everything in Azure is automatically updated for you. So if you open any Azure SQL database that you have, you will have this new vector type that you can use. It's also available on premises, but to get access to that, you need to enlist yourself into the SQL Server 2025 private preview that is running right now. Soon we'll also move into public preview, so you can choose if you want to use on premises or Azure SQL. Again, at the end of the day, the feature is exactly the same. And how do you create a vector? It's super easy. You just create a table and then use the new vector type and then specify the number of dimensions that the vector must have. And that's pretty much it. Then once you have the vector in there, which is behind the scenes stored in a efficient and optimized binary format, from Python, we decided, and this is true for all languages, not just for Python, we decided that vectors are probably more easily managed by developer if we present them as JSON arrays. So to send a vector to SQL Server or to get a vector from SQL Server Azure SQL, you just have to send a JSON array here. So that's your array. You can do JSON dump, and when Azure SQL Server receives that information, it will actually parse the vector and save it into a binary format. And when you request the vector, again, it will be exposed as a JSON array string, which make it super easy to turn it into a proper type here, in this case, using JSON load. So very easy and very straightforward. No special libraries needed, no special updates. It's just a regular PyDBC connection, and that's it. What about Langchain support? Because maybe you are already using Langchain or you want to start using Langchain. So we have full support in the sense that we have created this new class called, or this new object called SQL Server Vector Store, which basically wraps the connection to SQL Server, the need to create a table, the need to turn some text into an embedding, the need to store it as a vector completely in a kind of a black box, if you want, And so you don't have to worry about understanding how the vector works in SQL Server, how to query a vector using, for example, vector distance, a new function we just released. You can just use it abstracting away from the database behind the scene if you wish to do so. And this is a very simple example on how you can get started. So you just add the Langchain SQL Server package, and then you define the vector store. You specify the connection string here. You specify how embeddings are resolved, which means when you specify some text, what is the function that is going to OpenAI or Azure OpenAI or the AI model, the embedding model that you have chosen to use, and turn that text into an embedding. In this case, I'm using OpenAI. So I just have to specify the function that will take care of turning the text into an embedding, the table where I want to save my embeddings, and then the dimension that I expect my embedding to have. Why we added this information here? Because it makes sense to compare one embedding with another only if the dimensions are the same. So we want to make sure that no matter what embedding model you're using, you can declare upfront how many dimensions you expect to have. So if that doesn't come back as you expect, you get an error and not just some random wrong data without letting you know what's going on. So we just want to be very precise and direct here. Yeah, I see some question. I so can go back here. So the question I see asking if MS SQL connection string does not contain a password. In this case, it's a passwordless string. Yeah, that's right. I'll show you the connection now that we have a passwordless approach. I can show you and share my connection string with you because there is nothing in there that will be secret, right? So that's something we will see together in the demo very soon. Just a couple of interesting things that I want you to know, then we'll move to Langchain. For example, one thing that people ask me is that is there is a way, for example, for me to write some Python code that is executed when my data change in Azure SQL? The answer is yes. In Azure, you have something called Azure Functions, and you create an Azure function that is bound to the change that happened in Azure SQL. So, for example, you can create a trigger binding and monitor a table. And whenever data in that table is changed, you can have your Python script executed in using Azure Function, which is a serverless compute tier that allows you to do pretty much everything that you have in mind with your own data, because you can just react to the change and then store maybe the transform data back to SQL, or just call something else outside SQL Server or Azure SQL, but it just wonderfully works. Some other developer instead told me, you know what, this is great, but I really don't like accessing database using, PyDBC or other stuff. I really would love to avoid to be able to, would love to avoid to have the need to install a driver. So there is any way that I can access my database using just a simple REST interface? The answer is yes. We have something called Data API Builder that you can install on top of Azure SQL Server, and that will turn your database into a stateless and scalable REST and GraphQL endpoint. So if you are interested in that, check out Data API Builder, because basically you can just talk to your database using pure REST operations, which is pretty cool, I think. Okay, so let me move to the sample here. So I'm going back to Azure SQL.dev, and actually, in order to show you how you can find the samples that I'm going to use, I'm going to use this little link here, Azure SQL DB sample CI search, which is a fun project I have built to show how you can actually use AI to empower your solution with more friendly user interface. Here, I can just ask, I'm interested in Langchain, so I can ask Langchain, let's even misspell it, samples. And this is actually using SQL Server and Azure SQL behind the scene to do a RAG pattern, so that I'm trying to index as fast as I can all the samples that we already built. So if you're interested in only Langchain samples, it will show you only the one that are relevant, as RAG pattern expects to do. To your question, with the explanation of the example here taken from the description of the example itself, and also the reason of why this sample is provided as an example, as an answer. So let's start with the basic one, the samples with Langchain and SQL Server. This is the link, very, very easy. And again, you probably don't need to really memorize this because you can always get it from also AzureSQL.dev, just ask for Langchain, and that's it. And this is actually what I have already loaded here. So is this one the right one? Yes. So let's start with a super simple test. Here, well, I have defined in the requirements my Langchain SQL Server package. And then I am using, for example, let's start with the simplest one. I'm setting up the embeddings. I'm using my connection string that is saved here. This is the example environment variable that I'm sharing with you. And this is the connection string. So the connection string for Azure SQL, you just specify the driver that you want to use, the server name, the database name, and as you can see, no password at all. Of course, I also show you how you can use password if you want, because maybe you haven't set up all the managed identities yet, or you are just using on-premises solution. But for example, if I'm using Azure, this is the only thing I need to use, right? And again, no password at all, so it's very nice. And automatically, the Langchain package will figure out that you haven't provided a password or a user, and then we'll try to use your token if you have logged in using a zCLI or Visual Studio Code to connect to the database. So pretty cool here. So let's move to the test. So I'm getting the connection string, and then I'm setting up the vector store on Langchain test table 1. And I'm also using, since I really love VS Code, also to create solution with Python, but also to query my data, I'm using this new or updated extension that we just released. It's called the MS SQL extension. That allows me to query my database right from VS Code. So here I have created my connection both to the SQL Server in Azure, actually it is Azure SQL, or to my localhost database. So let's use this one first. Let me close this one to make sure that I'm connecting to the right one. I'm connecting to the database. The first thing I want to show you is which is the SQL Server version I'm running. And I'm running the latest and greatest, so the preview. Since I'm in the product group, of course, I have access to the private preview, but it is running this is running on, let me zoom out a bit. This is running on, here we go, on the developer edition on using Linux. So let me copy this text here. You will see that is running the developer edition running on Linux. So it's very nice. Actually, this is running on my Docker image here, which is again Ubuntu based. It's very easy to install a SQL Server using Docker. You just do SQL command create, and that's it. So it takes just 1 minute, and in this case I'm even running the latest and greatest private preview. But anyway, having said that, so just to show that we are running everything where you may not even expect it, and I'm using this free version called Developer Edition. Now here I don't have the table that I want to use as a test, so let's just try to run this this simple sample that will create a vector store in a table called Langchain test table 1 and then test table 2, just to show that you can have more than one vector store. And then I'm trying to just add some names here, some payload. And then I'm showing you this more like example on how the API works for Langchain. So you can delete even the stored data, or then you can add the text. And again, doing some tests just to show how you can get confident with the API. And then I'm doing similarity search, and I want to see what are the most common rows that I inserted to the term ship that I'm using here. and I want to see what is the most similar to ship among all the text that I've inserted. And of course, well, we'll see what is the answer, but I guess you expect that probably both will be the first one. So let's run it. Actually, I think I have an environment created here. So venv script activate, and then I can just go into samples and do Python and then run test one, and let's see what happened. So this again will connect to my local database, and then okay, and then connecting. Now, why I'm also showing you this, because if you try to connect to SQL Server 2025, you will get a warning because behind the scene, the libraries is using SQL Alchemy, which doesn't know about this new version because we literally released it, announced it 2 weeks ago. So it's just raising a warning saying, hey, looks like you have a version of SQL Server that I never saw before. Some feature may not function properly. That is not the case because, of course, we always make sure that everything we do is backward compatible. So don't worry, but just to also show that behind the scene, I'm using Langchain and SQL Alchemy. And here, let's go into the query right now. So let's do select star from. Now let's see if the table has been created. Yes, of course, we have these two tables. So let's do .langchain test table 1, and you will see that I have all the data. So this is the content. This is some meta. Oops, this is what happened here. Let me close this one. Sorry, and let's execute this again. Here we go. This is some metadata that I just add randomly to show that you can also store JSON in Azure SQL. And these are the embeddings that have been calculated. Again, you saw them as arrays, but they're actually binary constructs. So again, it's nice to see them just in case you want to have some idea of what an embedding look like. Again, we are not probably never going to use these values manually because what we will be doing is using the similarity function that we want to use with the Langchain. So, oops, I think here's my result. So as you would expect, if I'm searching for ship, the first document return is the one that contains both. So that is great. And then I can also ask for information with the score result, so the similarity result, or I can just use it as a retriever, which if you've been using Langchain for a while, you know that retriever is a key concept in Langchain. And of course, you can turn your function is retriever as you would expect. So this is to start just with Langchain. You have many more samples here, how to create an agentic RAG, how to do semantic search. I don't have time to show it here. I only have 5 minutes as far as I know. I think so, right? And then
yeah,
so what I want to show.
Sorry, we have a few minutes left, plus some just 1 or 2 questions that are left.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Perfect. So I think I'm on perfectly on time because what I want to do right now is move to this other example, chatbot on your own data with Langchain and Chainlit. Again, make sure that you just search Langchain into this nice AI search that you can reach if you go to AzureSQL.dev, click on AI samples, and then let's search again for, let's search for Langchain and Chainlit. And you'll see that you'll get the answer that you want. So this is the other example that I want to show you. I will not go through the example. The only thing I want to show is that I have, in this case, I decided to use a story procedure to find the things that are similar to what I'm looking for. So is this find session here? This is an example that uses session data from a conference to find what are the most common session. And I just want to show you here that behind the scene, Langchain is doing nothing magic. It's just using the new vector distance function that we created in Azure SQL and SQL Server to efficiently calculate cosine distance or dot product or Euclidean distance between 2 given vectors. And of course, if we run the example here. So I think I can just go to Chainlit and then do run. Yeah, enable. Here we go. The virtual environment, and then I can just do run. And well, I also have a demo with LangGraph, but let's just start with a regular one. You will see that thanks to the integration with Langchain, you can have, you define your prompt, as you probably know, but you can create a runnable Lambda that calls your function that behind the scene call. In my case, a store procedure, but a retriever that I showed before with Langchain to basically search across all your data. So here, for example, I have just a couple of sample sessions here, one on how to bake pizza and another one on how to do SQL and AI solutions. So let's say, hi, how I want to learn how to bake pizza, and let's see if the AI bot is able to help us. Is basically going into my database, executing vector search on the session that I have created. And as you can see here, John Doe is delivering a session called Unlock the Art of Making Pizza that I may be interested in. So this is RAG on your data, saved in Azure SQL, accessed via similarity search using vector store. So very nice end-to-end demo. I know I've rushed it a bit, but I just wanted to show you how you can start from scratch, explore Langchain, and then what is the final result that you can build. And to give you an idea on how much I took to create this result, this solution, of course, Chainlit comes with a full UI, so it was very easy. I think I took like half an hour, let's say 1 hour, for me to just write the storage procedure, add some sample data, set up Langchain and integration with Chainlit, and I was done. So pretty nice. With
That's
that,
been an amazing session. I'm really enjoying it. And I got time for just one more question from our audience, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Pamela has a really great question. And actually very, very simple. What extension were you using for executing queries?
This one, SQL Server MS SQL extension. This is an old one that has been refreshed lately. So it much more meet the developer expectation. So if you've been using this session lately, make sure to download it again. It's all refreshed. You have to enable the experimental feature that I can share later, a link on how to do that. We have a dev blog post on our blog. And then you basically have the same experience that you would expect having on Management Studio or Azure Data Studio, but in VS Code. So zero friction, zero time lost moving from one context to another. It's very nice, and it's all here. So it's very, very super cool, I would say.
Great. Well, hey, this was a fantastic session. We're really glad. I am a NoSQL person myself, being from the Cosmos DB team, but I'm always interested in hearing like how people are using, standard, as I like to call them, tabular databases, going in and
yeah. I guess now all modern databases are, I would say, converging, because NoSQL database are trying to be more structured, and relational database are now supporting JSON and unstructured data. So I guess it's more like a question on what do you like more, because functionally wise they are kind of overlapping a lot right now, I would say.
Great. Well, we got to move along, but I wanted to say thank you so much for being part of our show today. It's been really great to hear from you. And I know that our audience appreciates learning more and more how to build these types of applications, and especially with Langchain being such a huge part of way AI apps are coming together. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. It was super fun for me.
Your day, evening, or wherever it is, your time.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.